What if a single father, working nights just to keep food on the table, risked everything to save a dying stranger, only to discover that stranger was the billionaire CEO who would later fire him without mercy? 6 weeks she's been here, one said, exhaustion heavy in her tone. 6 weeks in that suite, and still no donor match. O negative is tough, the other replied. And at her age, with her condition deteriorating, I don't know how much time she has left. What gets me is how alone she is. All that money, all that power, and she's just alone. No family, no friends, just her assistant dropping off paperwork and leaving. Money can't buy everything, I guess. They moved away, their conversation fading, but those words stayed with Marcus, looping in his mind as he pushed his cart down the empty hallway. Marcus, 34 years old, single father, widower, survivor. Marcus wasn't always cleaning hospital floors for $12 an hour. 3 years ago, he had a different life. He was an assistant manager at Bennett Hardware downtown, named after his grandfather who started the business. He had Sarah, his high school sweetheart, his wife, the center of his universe. And they had Lily, 6 years old now, with her mother's dark eyes and her father's quiet determination. Then everything fell apart. Sarah's diagnosis came without warning. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4, the kind that gives you a timeline instead of a treatment plan. 6 months, the doctors said. Maybe 8, if they were lucky. They weren't lucky. Sarah fought for 5 months. 5 months of hospitals and treatments that drained their savings faster than Marcus could earn. 5 months of watching the woman he loved disappear piece by piece. And when she finally let go, when the machines went quiet and the nurses pulled the sheet over her face, Marcus was left with 2 things: a 6-year-old daughter who didn't understand why mommy wasn't coming home, and medical debt that would follow him for the rest of his life. The hardware store couldn't hold his position. He understood. They had a business to run. So Marcus took what he could get, night custodian at Riverside Medical Center. It paid less, but the hours worked. His neighbor, Mrs. Chen, a retired teacher with a heart bigger than her tiny apartment, offered to watch Lily overnight. Marcus paid her what he could, brought her groceries when he had extra, shoveled her sidewalk in winter. Every night at 10 p.m., Marcus kisses Lily goodnight, watches her close her eyes, and walks next door to Mrs. Chen's apartment. He works until 7 a.m., comes home as Lily's waking up, makes her breakfast, walks her to the bus stop. Then he collapses on a couch that's seen better days and tries to sleep for 4 hours before the cycle starts again. Marcus never wanted recognition. He just wanted to help. But when his act of selfless courage was met with coldness and rejection, when the woman whose life he saved became the woman who fired him, everything he believed about kindness was put to the test. And grace? She was about to learn the hardest lesson of her life, that some debts can never be repaid, that some wounds cut deeper than any surgical incision, and that sometimes the people we hurt the most are the ones who saved us. So I'm asking you now, what would you do? If you sacrificed everything for someone and they betrayed you, would you forgive? Would you walk away? Would you regret your choice? Stay with me. Hey, hit that subscribe button because what happens next will challenge everything you think you know about gratitude, justice, and the price of being human. Also tell us where you are watching from. It was a Tuesday night, sometime around 2 a.m., when Marcus first heard about the woman in Suite 9C. He was working the 3rd floor, East Wing, emptying trash bins outside the nurses' station. 2 nurses were finishing their shift, their voices low but not quite low enough to be private. But a kidney? That was different. That was something someone could give. Something that could save a life. For days Marcus couldn't shake the thought. He found himself researching living kidney donation during his brief sleep hours, learning about the process, the risks, the recovery. O negative was a universal donor type. He was O negative. He was healthy, or healthy enough. He could help. But there was Lily. Every time Marcus considered volunteering, her face appeared in his mind. What if something went wrong during surgery? What if he died? What if he survived but couldn't recover, couldn't work, couldn't provide for her? She'd already lost her mother. Could he risk making her an orphan? 3 weeks passed. The woman in Suite 9C was still there, still alone, still dying. Finally, Marcus made a decision. He'd volunteer for testing, see if he was a match. Let fate decide. He approached the hospital's transplant coordinator during his lunch break, a woman named Dr. Reyes, who looked at him with surprise when he explained what he wanted. "You don't know the patient?" "No, ma'am, and you understand this is major surgery? There are risks, recovery time. You'd be giving away a vital organ." I understand. Why would you do this?" Marcus looked down at the sunflower on his arm. "Because someone needs help, and I can give it." Dr. Reyes studied him for a long moment. Then she handed him paperwork. Blood tests were scheduled, medical history reviewed, psychiatric evaluation to ensure he understood the implications. 4 weeks later, the call came. "Mr. Bennett, you're a perfect match. If you're still willing, we can schedule the surgery in 2 weeks." Marcus sat on his couch, phone trembling in his hand. This was it, the moment of truth. He opened his mouth to say yes, but the word wouldn't come. "Mr. Bennett, can I have some time to think?" There was a pause. "Of course, but please let us know soon. Time is critical for the recipient." He hung up and stared at the wall. For 13 days, Marcus lived in a state of paralyzed terror. He'd gone through all the tests thinking the odds were against him, thinking the decision would be made for him, but now it was real. Now it was his choice. And he was terrified. He researched every possible complication: infection, blood clots, kidney failure in his remaining kidney, death on the operating table. The statistics said these outcomes were rare. But rare didn't mean impossible. What kind of father risked his life for a stranger? What kind of man abandoned his daughter to help someone he'd never met? The night before the surgery, Marcus didn't sleep. He sat at his kitchen table, staring at Lily's drawings on the refrigerator, paralyzed by doubt. At 3 a.m., he made his decision. He wasn't going through with it. He'd call the hospital in the morning, tell them he'd changed his mind. They'd understand, they'd find another donor, and Lily would be safe. That's all that mattered. When his alarm went off at 4 a.m., early because he was supposed to be at the hospital by 6, Marcus silenced it and stayed in bed, his chest tight with guilt and relief. He wasn't going. At 5:30, Mrs. Chen knocked softly on his door. She had Lily with her, still sleepy in her pajamas, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Ready, Marcus?" Mrs. Chen asked gently. Marcus shook his head, unable to meet her eyes. "I can't. I'm sorry. I thought I could do this, but I can't." "Daddy?" Lily's voice was small, confused. "What's wrong?" "Nothing, sweetheart. Daddy just changed his mind about something, about helping the sick person." His throat tightened. "Yeah." Lily was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she stepped closer and took his hand. "Daddy, remember what Mommy used to say?" Marcus looked down at his daughter, this impossibly wise 6-year-old. "She said being scared is okay. Everybody gets scared. But being scared and doing the right thing anyway?" Lily squeezed his hand. "That's what makes you brave." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Sarah had said that. During her treatment, when Lily was afraid of the hospital, of the machines, of losing her mother. Sarah had held their daughter and whispered those exact words. Marcus knelt down, pulled Lily into his arms. "You're right, sweetheart. You're absolutely right." He looked up at Mrs. Chen. "Can you go?" she said, already lifting Lily. "We'll be praying for you." Marcus grabbed his bag and ran. He made it to Riverside Medical Center at 6:47 a.m. The surgery was scheduled for 7. He burst through the doors of the surgical wing, sweating, shaking, terrified. A nurse looked up in alarm. "Mr. Bennett? We thought—" "I'm here," he gasped. "I'm sorry, I'm here." The surgical team scrambled. They'd been minutes from canceling, from calling the woman in Suite 9C and telling her the donor had backed out. But Marcus hadn't backed out. He'd shown up. At the 11th hour, terrified but determined, because his daughter was right. Being scared was okay. But letting fear stop you from doing what's right? That wasn't okay. That wasn't the man Marcus wanted to be. Wasn't the father he wanted Lily to remember. So he let them prep him, let them wheel him into surgery. Let them put him under. And as the anesthesia pulled him down into darkness, his last thought was of Sarah. "I hope I'm making you proud." The surgery took 4 hours. Marcus woke in recovery, with pain radiating from his side like fire, sharp and unrelenting. A nurse was there immediately, adjusting his IV, speaking in low, soothing tones. "You did beautifully, Mr. Bennett. The surgery was a complete success. The recipient is already showing signs of improvement." Marcus tried to speak, but his throat was raw from the breathing tube. The nurse offered him ice chips, helped him take tiny sips of water. "Rest now, you're going to be okay." But okay felt far away. The next 72 hours were the hardest of Marcus's life. Worse than the grief after Sarah died. Worse than the nights he worked through pain and exhaustion. Because this was physical agony combined with crushing doubt. Had he made the right choice? Every movement hurt. Every breath was labor. He couldn't stand without help, couldn't walk more than a few steps without dizziness overwhelming him. The surgical incision throbbed despite the morphine, and all he could think about was Lily, about how much time he'd have to take off work, about whether he'd ever fully recover. But on day 4, Mrs. Chen brought Lily to visit. His daughter stood in the doorway of his hospital room, eyes wide, taking in the IV lines and monitors and the paleness of his skin. "Daddy?" Marcus forced a smile. "Hey, Lilybug, come here." She climbed carefully onto the bed nestled against his good side, and Marcus wrapped his arm around her. "Does it hurt?" she asked quietly. "A little. But I'm okay." Lily pulled a folded paper from her pocket, smoothed it out. Another drawing. Marcus in a hospital bed, a big heart on his chest, and Lily holding his hand. At the bottom, "Mammy Daddy saved someone." Marcus's eyes burned with tears. "Thank you, sweetheart. Mrs. Chen said you were brave. She said you helped someone who was very sick." "I tried to." "Do you know them?" "No." "Then why did you do it?" Marcus pulled her closer. "Because sometimes we help people not because we know them, but because they need help, and if we can make someone's life better, even if it costs us something, that's what good people do." Lily thought about this. Then she kissed his cheek. "I'm glad you're my daddy." And in that moment, despite the pain, despite the fear, despite everything, Marcus knew he'd made the right choice. He stayed in the hospital for 6 days total. Physical therapists helped him walk, taught him exercises, warned him about the long recovery ahead. 8 to 12 weeks before he could return to full duty. Months before he'd feel normal again. Marcus worried about money, about bills, about how he'd manage, but Mrs. Chen insisted Lily could stay with her as long as needed. The neighbors in his building, hearing about the donation, brought meals and covered his rent for 2 months. The hospital social worker connected him with assistance programs. People were kind, strangers were kind. It gave Marcus hope. Hope that maybe the world wasn't as cold as it sometimes felt. On the day he was discharged, Marcus signed the final paperwork and asked the question that had haunted him since surgery. "The person who received the kidney, are they okay?" The nurse smiled. "She's doing wonderfully. You gave her a second chance at life, Mr. Bennett. You're a hero." Marcus didn't feel like a hero. He felt exhausted and scared and uncertain about the future, but he'd done it. He'd faced his fear and made the sacrifice anyway. And that, he was learning, was enough. Grace Lafayette woke from surgery feeling like she'd been hit by a truck, Every part of her body ached, but beneath the pain, there was something else. Something she hadn't felt in over a year. Hope. The doctor confirmed it the next morning. The transplant was a complete success. Your new kidney is functioning perfectly. You're going to live, Miss Lafayette. Grace closed her eyes, overwhelmed by relief so profound it hurt. She'd spent the last 14 months facing her mortality, watching her body betray her. Realizing that all the money in the world couldn't buy what she needed most, a compatible donor. She'd built Lafayette Technologies from nothing, turned a startup in her garage into an empire worth billions. She'd revolutionized cloud infrastructure, employed thousands, changed the industry forever, but none of that mattered when your kidneys failed. None of it could save you. The donor, Grace asked, her voice hoarse. Who were they? The doctor shook her head. It was an anonymous living donation. I can't disclose that information. I don't care about the rules. I need to know. I'm sorry, Miss Lafayette. Privacy laws. Find out, Grace interrupted, her tone sharp, despite her weakness. I don't care how. Find out who saved my life, because in Grace's world every transaction had terms. Every favor came with strings. Someone had given her a kidney, and she needed to know why. Needed to know what they wanted in return. She spent 2 weeks recovering in Suite 9C, her body slowly healing, her mind racing. Caroline, her assistant, visited daily with reports and paperwork, but Grace barely listened. She was consumed by one question: who would do this? Finally, she hired David Crane, private investigator, discreet, expensive, the kind of man who could find anything if you paid him enough. Find my donor, she told him. Everything about them, why they did it, what they want. 2 weeks later, David returned with a folder. Grace opened it with trembling hands. Inside, a photograph. A man in a custodial uniform. Dark hair, tired eyes. Beside him, a little girl with bright eyes and a shy smile. The name beneath, Marcus Bennett. Night custodian, David explained. Works at Riverside Medical Center. Single father. Wife died 3 years ago. Lives paycheck to paycheck. No criminal record. No connections to you or your company beyond his employment. Grace stared at the photo. He works for me? Cleans the Lafayette Technologies headquarters building. Night shift. Something cold settled in Grace's chest. The man who'd saved her life was someone she walked past every day without seeing. Someone invisible. Someone beneath her notice. He didn't know who you were, David continued. The donation was anonymous. He volunteered to help a stranger, that's all. Grace closed the folder, her hands shaking. This changed nothing, she told herself. She'd find a way to compensate him. A financial settlement, a trust fund for his daughter, something clean and transactional. But looking at that photograph, at the weariness in Marcus's eyes, the love in the way he held his daughter, Grace felt something she hadn't felt in years. Shame. 3 weeks after her surgery, Grace returned to work. She was thinner, weaker, but determined to reassert control. Her executive team had managed well in her absence, but Lafayette Technologies was hers. And she needed everyone to remember that. Caroline was reviewing the day's schedule as they walked through the headquarters lobby when Grace saw him. A custodian. Mopping near the elevators, moving slowly, carefully, favoring his left side. Marcus Bennett, and beside him, holding his hand, was the little girl from the photograph. Grace stopped cold. Who is that? Caroline glanced over. One of the night custodians, working a day shift apparently. I can have security. No, Grace said, her voice sharp. I'll handle it. She approached, her heels clicking on the marble floor, her expression cold and controlled. Marcus looked up, and for a moment, their eyes met. He didn't recognize her. Why would he? He'd donated to a name on paperwork, not a face. Excuse me, Grace said, her voice cutting through the quiet lobby. This is a professional workplace, not a daycare. Children are not permitted during business hours. Marcus straightened, his face flushing. Ms. Lafayette, I'm sorry. My daughter's school had a half day, and my childcare fell through. I didn't have anyone else to. That's not my concern, Grace interrupted. Your personal problems don't belong in this building. This is unprofessional, unacceptable. Lily pressed closer to her father's leg, her eyes wide with fear. Please, Marcus said, his voice quiet but desperate. I just need to finish this section, then I'll take her home. It won't happen again. I promise. Grace looked at him, really looked at him, saw the exhaustion in his face, the way he was holding his side as if in pain, saw the desperation of a man barely holding on, and she felt nothing. Or rather, she felt what she'd trained herself to feel: detachment, control, power. This was her building, her empire, and employees who couldn't maintain professional standards didn't belong here. You're fired, she said, the words cold and final. Collect your belongings and leave. Security will escort you out. Marcus's face went white. Ms. Lafayette, please, I need this job. I have a daughter to support, medical bills. I can't. You should have considered that before bringing her here. I don't make exceptions, but We're done, Grace turned to Caroline. Notify HR. I want his termination processed immediately. She walked toward the elevators, her back straight, her expression neutral. Behind her, she heard the little girl start to cry, heard Marcus trying to soothe her, his voice breaking. And Grace Lafayette, whose life had been saved by that man just weeks earlier, didn't look back. She rode the elevator to the top floor, walked into her corner office, closed the door, and told herself she'd done the right thing, the professional thing, the necessary thing. But that night, alone in her penthouse, she couldn't stop seeing Lily's terrified face, couldn't stop hearing Marcus's voice. Ye need this job. And she couldn't stop feeling the scar on her side, the gift he'd given her, the gift she'd just repaid with cruelty. For 2 weeks, Grace tried to forget. She threw herself into work with a ferocity that alarmed even Caroline. Board meetings, strategy sessions, acquisitions, anything to avoid thinking about Marcus Bennett and the way his face had crumbled when she fired him. She told herself it was a coincidence, that she hadn't known who he was, that she'd made a reasonable decision based on policy. But late at night, when the city lights stretched below her penthouse windows and the silence pressed in, Grace couldn't escape the truth. She'd known, maybe not consciously, not in that moment in the lobby, but some part of her had recognized him from David's file, had seen the man who'd saved her life and punished him anyway. Why? Grace sat in her office on a Friday evening, everyone else gone home, staring at the folder David had given her. She'd hidden it in her desk drawer, out of sight but never out of mind. Finally, she opened it again. Marcus's photograph stared back at her, and this time, Grace let herself really see him, the exhaustion that came from working nights and raising a child alone. The grief still visible in his eyes 3 years after losing his wife. The quiet strength of someone who kept going despite carrying impossible weight. This was the man who'd risked everything for her, and she'd destroyed him. Grace picked up her phone, called David. The man you investigated, Marcus Bennett. Find out what happened after I fired him. David called back 3 hours later. It's not good, Ms. Lafayette. He's been trying to find work, but most places won't hire him with a termination on his record from your company. He's behind on rent. His daughter is enrolled in the free lunch program at school. The neighbor who was helping with childcare is elderly and can't anymore. He's drowning. Grace closed her eyes. Anything else? He's still recovering from surgery. His doctor recommended 12 weeks before returning to physical labor. He was fired at 6 weeks. He's in pain, can't afford follow-up care, and is trying to find work he physically can't do yet. The surgery, the kidney donation, the sacrifice he'd made for her. Thank you, David. Grace hung up and sat in the darkness of her office, the weight of what she'd done crushing her. She'd spent her entire life building walls, protecting herself, believing that vulnerability was weakness, that needing people made you less, that power meant never owing anyone anything. And then Marcus Bennett had given her a kidney. Not because he wanted something, not because he knew who she was, but because it was the right thing to do. He'd given her a second chance at life, and she'd repaid him by taking away his daughter's stability, his hope, his future. Grace Lafayette had won every battle she'd ever fought, had climbed over everyone in her path, had sacrificed relationships and humanity for success. But looking at Marcus's photograph, seeing the cost of her cruelty, Grace realized something that shattered her. She'd won everything, and become nothing. The kind of person who would punish the man who saved her life. The kind of person who could look a 6-year-old child in the eye and not feel compassion. The kind of person who'd lost every bit of humanity on the climb to the top. For the first time since she was a child in Detroit, watching her parents struggle, Grace Lafayette cried. She cried for the person she'd become, for the loneliness she'd cultivated, for the walls she'd built so high she couldn't see the people around her anymore. And she cried for Marcus, for what she'd taken from him, for the injustice of it all. When the tears finally stopped, Grace made a decision. She couldn't undo what she'd done, couldn't take back the harm, but she could try to make it right, even if Marcus never forgave her, even if she didn't deserve forgiveness. She had to try. Marcus Bennett sat on the steps outside his apartment building, his head in his hands, trying to figure out how everything had fallen apart so quickly. It had been 3 weeks since Grace Lafayette fired him. 3 weeks of applications and interviews and rejection. 3 weeks of watching his savings, what little there was, disappear into rent and food and bills. His landlord had been patient, but patience had limits. The eviction notice taped to his door said he had 30 days to pay what he owed or leave. 30 days to find work. To find a miracle. Mrs. Chen had offered to watch Lily during the day while Marcus job hunted, but she was getting older, more fragile. He couldn't keep asking her for help she could barely give. And Lily. God, Lily. She'd stopped drawing pictures, stopped smiling as much. She'd gotten quiet, watchful, as if bracing for the next catastrophe, as if waiting for Marcus to disappear the way her mother had. Marcus pressed the heels of his palms against his eyes. The incision from the surgery still ached, a constant reminder of the choice that had led him here. Some days he regretted it, regretted the selflessness that had cost him everything, but most days he didn't, because at least he'd tried to be the kind of person Sarah would be proud of. The kind of father Lily deserved, even if the world punished him for it. A black town car pulled up to the curb. Marcus didn't pay attention until a woman in an expensive suit stepped out. Grace Lafayette. Marcus stood slowly, his body tensing. What was she doing here? Come to make sure he was really gone? To deliver another blow? Mr. Bennett, she said, her voice different than it had been in the lobby. Softer, uncertain. Ms. Lafayette? His voice was flat, guarded. I need to talk to you. I don't think we have anything to talk about. Please. The words seemed to cost her something. Just 5 minutes. Marcus wanted to refuse, wanted to tell her to leave, to go back to her tower and her empire and leave him alone, but something in her face stopped him. She looked broken, nothing like the cold, imperious woman who'd fired him. 5 minutes, he said. Grace nodded, glanced at the town car. Her driver remained inside, giving them privacy. I know who you are, she began. I know what you did for me. Marcus went still. What? The kidney donation. 3 months ago. That was you. For me. The world tilted. Marcus grabbed the railing, steadying himself. You're the person in Suite 9C? Yes. How did you? I hired an investigator. I needed to know who saved my life. Grace's voice cracked. And then I fired you. Without knowing what I was thinking. Marcus stared at her, his mind racing. The woman he'd saved, the person he'd risked everything for, was the same woman who'd taken everything from him. The irony was almost funny, almost. "Why are you here?" he asked. "To make it right or try to—" Grace pulled an envelope from her purse, held it out. "This is a check, enough to cover your rent for a year, your medical bills, your daughter's needs. I'm reinstating your position, with a raise and day shift hours. I'm setting up an education fund for Lily. Stop." Marcus didn't take the envelope. "You think money fixes this?" "No, I don't. But it's what I can offer. You humiliated me in front of my daughter. You took away my ability to provide for her. You made me feel like nothing." "I know. Do you? Do you really?" Marcus's voice rose, 3 weeks of anger and fear and desperation finally breaking free. "You saved your life, and you repaid me by almost destroying mine, and now you show up with a check and think that makes it okay?" Grace's eyes filled with tears. "No, it doesn't make it okay. Nothing I do will ever make it okay, but I have to try. Because you gave me something I can never repay, a second chance, and I used it to hurt you, and I can't live with that." Marcus looked at her, this billionaire CEO standing on his crumbling apartment steps, crying, and he realized something. She was just as broken as he was. Just as lost. Money and power hadn't protected her from loneliness, from illness, from becoming the kind of person who hurt people without meaning to. She was human. Flawed and struggling and desperately trying to be better, just like him. Marcus took the envelope, not because he forgave her, he wasn't ready for that yet, but because Lily deserved stability, deserved a future, and his pride couldn't stand in the way of that. "I'll take the job," he said quietly. "And the help. For my daughter. But understand something, Ms. Lafayette. Forgiveness isn't something you can buy, it's something you earn. And that's going to take more than a check." "I know," Grace whispered. "And I'm willing to do whatever it takes." Marcus nodded. "Then we'll see." Grace returned to her car, and Marcus watched it disappear down the street. He looked at the envelope in his hand, felt the weight of it. The promise of stability, of breathing room, of hope. And he thought about Sarah, about what she would say if she could see him now. She'd tell him that forgiveness was hard, that people made mistakes, that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was give someone a second chance, even when they didn't deserve it. Maybe especially then. Marcus went inside, where Lily was doing homework at the kitchen table. She looked up. "Who was that, Daddy? Someone who needed help," he said. "Just like we do. Did you help them?" Marcus smiled, tired but genuine. "I think we're going to help each other," and for the first time in weeks, he believed things might actually be okay. 6 months after that conversation on Marcus's apartment steps, things looked different. Marcus works day shift now, at Lafayette Technologies headquarters, but in a new role, facilities manager, with benefits and a salary that lets him breathe for the first time in years. Lily's in a good school, thriving, her drawings bright with color again. And Grace, she's still CEO, still powerful, still wealthy. But she's different. She knows the names of the people who clean her building now. She asks about their families. She listens. She started programs for employee assistance, for single parents, for people struggling the way Marcus struggled. Not because it makes good PR, not because it benefits her bottom line, but because she remembers what it felt like to need help, and what it cost the man who gave it. Are they friends? Not quite. The hurt runs too deep, the power imbalance too real, but there's respect, understanding, a shared knowledge of what they survived, separately and together. Marcus still has the scar on his side, Grace still has the kidney he gave her, and both carry something else, the memory of who they were in that moment. The worst and best of themselves, laid bare. Grace learned that wealth without humanity is worthless, that power without compassion is prison, that success means nothing if you're alone when you die. And Marcus learned that kindness has a cost, that sacrifice isn't always rewarded, but that choosing to be good, even when the world punishes you for it, is the only way to live with yourself. Hit that subscribe button and notification bell for more stories. Don't miss out the next stories. Be the hero your own story needs. The world is waiting. And so is someone who needs you, whether you know it yet or not.